Hi everybody, welcome to my kitchen. Today we are going to be learning some more plant-based recipes. Right now, plant-based is all the rage, but when it comes to plant-based and the clients that I work with, one of the things that there's two things I notice. When somebody goes plant-based, a lot of times they're still relying on heavily processed things that they would buy at the store. I mean, Oreos are plant-based. So we need to still focus on cooking and preparing foods at home for your best health. The other thing I noticed with people who are going plant-based is that a lot of times you're not actually getting enough protein. So when I do a diet analysis on somebody who's going plant-based, I see that they're not necessarily getting a lot of protein because it is harder to meet your protein goals if you're not eating animal products. So the average the average sedentary adult needs 60 grams of protein a day. It's really not hard to meet that goal. However, that is just to avoid a protein deficiency disease. We don't want to just avoid a protein deficiency. We want to feel good. We want to preserve our lean muscle mass, which means that we need to be getting more protein. And because the protein in plants is not as bioavailable to the body as protein from animal sources, it's really important that if you're going plant-based, that you're making sure you get enough protein in your diet. That said, I also want to make a note that plant-based does not necessarily mean that you're vegan or full vegetarian. As a plant-based, I'm going more plant-based myself, but I still do eat meat. I eat fish a few times a week. I still eat eggs. So anyway, today what we're going to be doing is you're basically going to get a full day of what it might look like, a day in the life of my eating. So, and we're going to be doing this as like what I would do on Sunday to plan for the week ahead. Meal prep, meal planning, that's also big for people. So I'm going to try to do a full day's worth of eating that's going to make extra enough so that I have at least 4 days worth of food that I can use throughout the week. So this is kind of how I do my meal planning and prep. I am definitely not a plan ahead or a prepping type of person. So you're just going to see how I do it, and we're going to do this in about 45 to 50 minutes. The other thing I will say is this is something that I might do on a Sunday evening. So I'm going to be prepping dinner at the same time that I'm prepping breakfast foods and also lunch foods for the week ahead. All right, so we are going to be making a spicy red lentil chili. And that's what we're going to start with. So I'm going to do this as if I'm making dinner for the evening. So our chili is going to be for dinner. I'm also going to make enough to last for at least a few days for lunches or for dinners throughout the week. So that's kind of how I do my planning. We're going to start with that because the lentils are going to need at least 30 minutes to sit in the chili so that they're nice and soft. So we're going to prep our veggies. Always kind of prep everything first. So we're going to do 1 red onion. We're going to do a few cloves of garlic. We're going to do 1 green pepper and 1 red bell pepper. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to prep this stuff and get it ready so that I can saute it in our stock pot. It would be really nice if you have one of those veggie choppers. But I tend to rough chop everything. Because I hate chopping vegetables. You can see that I'm not a trained chef when I'm chopping things. This is real life right here. But I did want to show you that I actually am doing this instead of just pre-prepping everything. right. And I'm going to go ahead and throw all these on a plate. All right, so I've got all of the veggies prepped, chopped, ready to go. So I've got my red onion, my red pepper, green pepper, and then I've got my garlic chopped up. Now what I'm gonna do before I do anything else is I'm gonna put together the spice blend. So the recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of all of these, but I tend to like my stuff a little bit more spicy, a little bit more flavorful. So I'm actually probably going to do almost a full tablespoon of these. And if you've seen my episodes before, you know that I'm not much for measuring. So, and the nice thing is when it comes to soups or chilies or stews, you don't really, unless you're trying to make it the same exact taste every time, you don't necessarily have to measure. So I'm gonna do about a tablespoon of cumin, about a tablespoon of chili powder, and this is smoked paprika. I don't have much left in here, so probably less than a half a teaspoon. So I'm gonna just put the rest in there. I love smoked paprika. It gives it a nice smoke flavor. And then about a teaspoon of oregano leaves. I actually do the teaspoon, maybe not a tablespoon, a teaspoon of the oregano leaves because they can have a little bit of a strong flavor. And then sea salt. So I'm gonna pour it into my hand. That's gonna be about a tablespoon of sea salt. And so now I've got my spice blend ready to go so that when it's time to put it into the pot with the veggies after they've sauteed for a little bit, they're right here, they're ready to go. I can just dump them in and we can get on with the recipe. All right, so we are ready to start actually cooking our chili. And what I'm gonna do is put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil into the bottom of a heavy stock pot. I really love using cast iron. A little bit more. And then I don't have my heat on yet, but I usually kind of make sure that the bottom of the pot is coated really well with the olive oil without soaking too much of it up. Okay, all right, now I'm gonna turn my heat on. That's the right one, yep. About, I don't know, medium high, so on mine it's somewhere about 5 or 6. Throw that away. As soon as the oil gets hot, I'm gonna put my veggies in and I'm gonna let them saute for a little bit until the onions are kind of translucent. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add the spices and the garlic. You don't want to add your garlic at the same time that you add in the veggies because garlic does tend to burn very easily, and some people don't like the flavor of burnt garlic. So it might just take a second here. I'm going to turn up my heat a little higher to get the oil heated up faster. And then let's see here. Just throw one in there. See if it starts to sizzle. Once it starts, I usually just put a little bit in and see if it starts to sizzle a little bit. All right, we're gonna take our plate load of veggies. The oil is hot and ready. Dump them all in there. And now we're gonna mix them up. I'm gonna stir them every minute or so. And these are probably gonna saute for somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes. Let them sit. It's gonna smell really good. Smells like a fajita. Give it a stir. All right, so if you're anything like me, you probably get impatient with waiting on things to really get where they're supposed to be. But the good news is about chilies, this stuff is gonna keep cooking for a little while. So the veggies could probably stand a couple of more minutes of saute, but I'm tired of this now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my spice blend and I'm gonna dump that in. And I'm gonna mix it up really well. And the spices, I might turn up the heat a little bit too. The spices are gonna toast. So this would be about another minute of cooking right here. And I'm also going to take the garlic that I chopped up. You could also grate the garlic, or you could press the garlic, whatever you prefer. I couldn't find my garlic press, so I decided to chop my garlic. Once again, just kind of mixing it up. It's really smelling good now. All right, it's mixed up well enough. Now, super simple. We're gonna take our vegetable stock and we're gonna dump the whole thing in. So this is about 4 cups of vegetable stock. We're just gonna dump the whole thing in. Okay, then we're gonna put 2 cups of red lentils in. I do actually measure this because if you overdo the lentils, they're gonna soak up too much of the broth. And if you underdo the lentils, it will be too watery. One of the few things I measure. All right, there's 1. All right, there's 2 cups of lentils. I'm gonna mix this up just a little bit. Make sure the lentils are all mixed in. Now I'm gonna add 2 cans of diced tomatoes and 1 can of Rotel. You could also use diced green chilies. If you don't like your chili very spicy, you don't necessarily have to add the chilies. I sometimes will also add a little bit, like if you like spice, sometimes I'll add a little bit of cayenne pepper sauce to this also. I might add a few shakes in there. So another thing is today I didn't have fire roasted tomatoes. I'm just using what I have. So these are regular diced tomatoes, but when I have the opportunity, or if I had happened to have fire roasted tomatoes, I would have used those. They just give it a little bit more smoke flavor. So I'm adding in my 2 cans of diced tomatoes. I'm gonna add in the Rotel. So that's got some green chilies in it. I'm gonna do a little bit, just a dash of red pepper sauce. Not everybody likes their chili as spicy as I do. And then I'm going to mix this up again. And then I'm going to cover it. So I'm gonna turn the heat. I want it to come back to a boil. And then what I'm gonna do, once it's boiling, I'm gonna turn the heat to low and I'm gonna cover it. It's gonna take about 25 to 30 minutes for the lentils to soak up a lot of that liquid. Once the lentils have soaked up the liquid, that's when I'm gonna add my black beans, my pinto beans, and my fire roasted corn kernels. Now, all of those are optional. You don't have to add beans if you don't like beans. You don't have to add corn if corn doesn't agree with you. So those are things that I just like in my chili. So I will add those in about 20-25 minutes once the lentils have soaked up some of the liquid. With the beans, I just don't like my canned beans overcooked because they can tend to get a little soft and mushy. So I'm gonna go ahead, give this one last stir. Gonna cover it, and then we are going to move on to salads in a jar.
From high school sports to community events and beyond, you can find all of your favorite local shows on the Armstrong Neighborhood Channel.
Hi, I'm Kristen Gambasini from Craft Table. You can check out my show as well as other local favorites such as Medina Minute, Cooking with Kelly, and Leisure and Literature on Armstrong Neighborhood Channel.
Check us out right now on Channel 100, or search Armstrong Neighborhood Channel on YouTube for playlists and much more. Spirit, town pride, community. This is the Armstrong Neighborhood Channel.
So our chili is cooking right now, and it needs about 20 minutes. So during this time, I am going to work on setting up my salad in a jar. So once again, there's a little bit of chopping involved. Now, if you were just making a salad for dinner or for a single meal, you wouldn't necessarily need to put it in a jar. But again, this is for food prep and meal planning, so planning ahead for the week. So I've got my jars here, wide mouth ball jars. And I'm gonna put the salads in there, and there's a way that you layer them so that things like the greens don't get soggy. So we're gonna make some of these salads in a jar, and I usually make 4 or 5 of them, and they will last 4 to 5 days in your refrigerator. And they're super easy, like once you've got them made, to grab and go. All right, so we are gonna prep a few of the veggies. We're going to take some small tomatoes. You could use regular tomatoes too, but I'm going to slice these in half. These are cherry tomatoes. And I'm also going to dice a red onion. And I'm going to dice some carrot as well. You could also do bell peppers. You could do any veggies that you like. You could do broccoli, cauliflower, whatever kind of veggies you would like in your salad. And I have a bunch of bowls here. If you are planning your salad, or you're actually putting the stuff in jars and planning ahead for the week, I will tell you, even though it creates more dirty dishes, if you put all of your ingredients in separate bowls and have them out right in front of you, it's much easier to make the salad in a jar. So that's what we're gonna do today. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with some of the chopping. Once again, I tend to be a rough chopper. I know some people would want these diced a little bit finer. If you have a veggie chopper, it makes it really easy, but I'm just gonna slice these and put them in a bowl. I'm all for easy because I'm a mom and I work full time and I don't have a lot of time. All right, so we've got our bowl of carrots. Let's go with some of these next. They're probably gonna go everywhere. So these are just tomatoes. I'm just cutting them in half. And if you're okay with the whole tomato, like I said, these are little grape tomatoes. You could just put them in your salad jar whole. You don't necessarily need to slice them. Let's use a smaller knife for this. Just do a few more of these. Tomatoes are so pretty. Especially get all the colors. All right, that'll be good, I think. Our tomatoes. I am gonna run over here really quick and give the chili a quick stir. The lentils are starting to soak up some of the liquid. Okay, we're gonna work on our onion. This onion was getting a little past its prime. It's okay. Just cut off the bad parts. There we go. You know what, we're going to use a smaller bowl for the onion. Sometimes when you do these salads in a jar, sometimes I don't do the onion, especially if the onions during that season have been particularly strong, because when you leave an onion in a jar with everything else for a few days, it can get a little bit strong tasting. So if you don't necessarily love the taste of onions, you may want to eliminate these or maybe keep them in a baggie on the side. Totally up to you though. All right, I am going to take a can of garbanzo beans or chickpeas, and I already drained them, and I'm gonna dump them into a bowl too. I'm gonna have those. I'm gonna take some sunflower seeds, and I'm gonna dump these into a bowl, because those will go into our jar. And now I buy these super easy bags of broccoli slaw. So this is pieces and parts of broccoli. Let's see here, what else is there? Red cabbage, carrot. I add these into my salad as well, just for that extra little bit of crunch. And then I have an arugula and spinach medley. So we're gonna be using some of that type of lettuce. And then in the big bowl, I'm actually gonna put the quinoa in a smaller bowl. When we talk about getting protein, plant-based protein, the beans, the quinoa, the nuts and seeds, that's where our main source of protein is really gonna come from. I need to find myself some spoons. So I did pre-cook this quinoa. It's the only thing that if you think about it ahead of time, you don't want to use hot quinoa. So you want to cook your quinoa and then you want it cooled down. Now, if you forgot to pre-cook your quinoa and put it in your refrigerator to cool it down, you can cook it and then you can rinse it with cold water until it's cool enough to put into your jars. But don't put hot quinoa in your salad jars. It will make your lettuce or your greens, it'll make them wilty and soggy. So I did pre-make this and chill it. Okay, I have an extra bowl here. We're not even gonna worry about that. All right, so there is a method to the madness of doing this. Again, we don't want soggy lettuce. We don't want soggy seeds. So what you're gonna do first, the first layer in your jar is going to be your dressing. Now, I'm super simple when it comes to dressings. I don't like to use store-bought dressings because they use crappy oils. So I always make my own, and probably my favorite dressing is just a balsamic vinaigrette. So I'm gonna dump maybe or pour about 2 tablespoons, maybe a little bit less of olive oil into the bottom of my jar. A little bit more there. Let's set that to the side. Then I'm going to, I really like balsamic. So I'm gonna dump a good amount of balsamic into the bottom there. And then I've got this easy squeeze basil. So you could use fresh chopped basil, but what ends up happening is I buy fresh basil and it sits in my refrigerator until it rots and it never gets used. So I love these easy squeeze basils. They also make they do it with cilantro, with lemongrass. So I like basil, giving it a good squeeze. And now I'm gonna cap it and I'm gonna shake it a little bit. Shake it up a little bit. Got to get the basil worked in there. If you like garlic, you could also press a little bit of garlic in here, but if you're taking these to work and you have coworkers around, maybe you don't want to add garlic. Be a little strong if it sits for a bit. Okay, so that's mixed up nicely. Now, your next layer is going to be things like tomatoes, cucumbers, red onion, celery, peppers, and carrots. So I have, of that group, we've got tomatoes, we've got our onion, and our carrots. I'm gonna do some of the tomatoes first. And today I only cut up enough for 2 jars. So if you are doing this at home and you're trying to get a few days worth of salads in a jar, you're probably gonna cut up a little bit more than what you saw me use today. I'm gonna add in my onions. Again, I'm gonna go pretty light on the onions. These smell pretty strong. I might not even put any onions in the next jar because it will really overtake some of the flavor. Then we're gonna layer in carrots. I really love carrots for their crunch, so I do a lot. All right, we got carrots. So we've got those layers going. Your next layer, layer 3, is going to be your things like mushrooms, zucchinis, beans, lentils, peas, corn, and broccoli. So of those things, I've got my chickpeas, those are my beans. And I think that's pretty much all I've got from that layer. So I'm gonna put in my chickpeas. You could also use black beans, depending on what you like. And you're gonna see really quickly that you're gonna need a pretty good sized jar for this. I'm gonna get that out of the way. Layer 4 is gonna be things like boiled egg and cheese if you're using those things. So if this is the part where I might put a little bit of wild caught pink salmon, or maybe a little bit of chicken or some ground turkey in there if I'm going non-plant-based or if I'm going non-vegetarian. But again, I feel like I'm getting plenty of protein between the beans, the seeds, and the quinoa. So I'm not gonna worry about putting any animal protein in there. All right, so our next layer, layer 5, would be pasta, quinoa, or couscous. So this is where I'm gonna add in my quinoa. And this is you probably wanna do, I don't know, maybe up to a half a cup, and I'm gonna pack it down in there because I wanna be able to fit some of my other stuff in there. Okay. Okay. And then the next layer is going to be your nuts or your seeds, a little bit there, don't need a ton. And now you're gonna add in your lettuces and whatever else you've got. So I'm not gonna so I don't have a whole lot of room left in my jar. Let's see if we can pack it down just a little bit more. Gonna add in some of my broccoli slaw. I guess I need a bigger jar. And then I'm gonna add in my greens. I really like arugula. It has a little bit of a spice to it. And I'm just really gonna pack it in there. Deep dark greens are your best bet when it comes to health. The darker colored your veggies and greens are, the more nutrients they have. All right, and so I'm gonna cap it, and I am going to put it into the refrigerator.
For over 2 decades, Zoom Internet has been a leader in broadband. And now, we've built the network of the future with 10G. 10 times faster than gig-speed internet. Able to support the limitless demand of the future. Providing advanced security for connected devices. Our fiber network is unmatched. Zoom from Armstrong. The Internet of Tomorrow, is here today.
All right, so our chili is probably, our salad's in a jar done. Our chili is getting done. The lentils are soaking things up. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add our beans. So it's the 1 can of pinto beans. We got a can of black beans. And then we've got fire roasted whole corn kernels. Gonna mix that up. Mix it up pretty well. Now you may need to add a little bit more salt to this, so you gotta salt it to your taste. I only added about a tablespoon from the get-go, so make sure you taste it. And so this, in another 10 minutes or so, is already ready to eat. And if you're going to be portioning this out for meal preparation, this is, again, I tend to use ball jars for everything. So I might use a size, I can't remember what size this exactly is here, but I might use a ball jar like this if I'm trying to pre-plan my meals for the week. And I'm gonna use one of these, and I'm gonna scoop it out, and I'm gonna fill my jar that way, gonna cap it, and I'm gonna put it in the refrigerator. And again, that way it's super easy to grab my lunch, to grab my salad. And again, if you want, you can, if you're trying to plan dinners ahead also, you know, you will have this for later in the week. But that's how I store my chilies and my soups also. But on a Sunday, when I'm doing my meal prep all around dinner time, this is just about ready to go for dinner. Just needs another 10 minutes or so. All right, so we've got our salads in a jar made. We've got our chili that's pretty much done. The final thing that I'm gonna do in my meal prep is I'm going to make protein balls. And these could suffice if you have a sweet tooth and you need something as a dessert, or if you need something that's really easy to grab and go for breakfast. This is really my go-to. I love these things. So it's really, really simple. All you're gonna do is you're gonna take some quick oats, and you're gonna do about 1 cup of them. Let's see here, this is a half a cup. This is something that I actually measure, because if you don't measure this, sometimes they can tend to come out a little bit dry. So I will go ahead and measure this. So you want whole oats, but you want them to be quick, the quick variety. All right, so we've got our 1 cup of oats. And then you're gonna use a 1 cup, and I'm not gonna measure this as much, but you're gonna use 1 cup of natural peanut butter. Now, if you can, try to use natural peanut butter. The ingredients should say only peanuts and salt. The other types of peanut butter, if you look at the ingredients, they're usually loaded with canola oil or soybean oil, and we don't necessarily want to be eating those things. So and I know it's a pain to stir these up. I just did this, but again, you don't want to be putting those highly inflammatory oils into your body if you don't have to. So I'm going to put about a cup, it's probably about half the jar, into the bowl. And then I'm going to be taking 1 scoop, sometimes I do 2 scoops, of your favorite plant-based protein powder. I love chocolate protein powder. All I happened to have today was vanilla, so I'm gonna use vanilla protein powder. And I've got it in here. I'm gonna dump it in there. You could also use one of the animal-based or a whey protein powder in this. It's gonna be just as good, but since we're focusing on plant-based, I did use a plant-based protein powder. Also with the peanut butter, if you are allergic to peanuts, try almond butter. Again, it turns out just as good. You are going to use 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed. So let's see here. I wonder if I have We don't need to measure this. Oh, there we go. All right, so we've got our tablespoon. 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds. I'm going to do 1 tablespoon of chia seeds. And chia seeds are optional. They just add a little bit of extra healthy fat, a little bit of protein, a little bit of fiber. You're going to do 1/3 a cup, roughly, of raw honey. So let's see here, 1/3 a cup. I hate to use cups for honey because the honey doesn't come out of the cup very nicely, but that's okay. We'll use the cup again. I feel like it's important to measure this particular recipe just because we're gonna leave this like that, and I am going to get one of these little spatulas and make this nice and easy for myself. All right, honey is going in. If you're worried about sugar, you could use a little less honey than this. Okay, we're gonna throw that in there. You're gonna do about 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. I actually do a full teaspoon. I love vanilla. Okay, that's a teaspoon of vanilla. 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm really just gonna shake some cinnamon in here. Good enough. And then you're gonna put in some chocolate chips. Now I try to go with dairy-free chocolate chips. Again, this is plant-based. So these Lily's chocolate chips, they are dairy-free. And this calls for about a handful. So I also prefer, these are milk chocolate. I prefer dark chocolate, but this is what I had. This would be optional as well if you don't want the chocolate chips in there. And I'm just gonna squeeze most of the rest of this in. Might as well use up the rest of the honey. Okay. Now, big tip here. This is really messy. If it's easiest to just mix this with your hands, but it's also really messy if you're gonna do it with your hands. So this is one of the few things I'll actually use gloves for. Really comes in handy. If you really want to worry your kids and husband, you strap on the latex gloves when you're in the kitchen cooking. All right, gonna get this out of the way. Sometimes it gets a little bit messy. So you're just gonna take and you're just gonna mix this up by hand. And if it seems like, I've played with this recipe some, if it seems like it's too dry or if it's too wet, if there's too much liquid or if it's too wet, you can always add extra protein powder or you can add extra oats. That's gonna soak up some of that moisture. If it seems like it's too dry, which is more often the case, then you can add more honey, you can add more peanut butter. You can also use almond butter, cashew butter. You could try sunflower butter. All right. Okay, so you can kind of see that it's almost like a paste consistency. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to work this into probably 2 tablespoon size balls. And it would be very convenient. Oh, I do happen to have another cutting board. You're going to throw these out onto a board. It's very easy if you have a little bit of wax paper. And then I usually refrigerate these before I would even have one. I usually try to refrigerate these for at least an hour. That way they're not quite as soft, they're not quite as messy. And then I might put them in little plastic bags, and that's how I would store them. Usually 2 in a bag. And in the morning, if I'm in a real hurry, I'll usually eat 2 or 3 of those. And again, I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan. I'm not always plant-based. So I might do, depending on my workout schedule, I might do 2 of these protein balls and 2 hard-boiled eggs. Or if I have a sweet tooth, which I do frequently, these really cut that craving for sweets if I just have 1 or even a half of one after a meal. All right, so our chili is done. If for some reason you felt like the chili was too watery, like I think this is the perfect consistency. It still has a little bit of liquid left in it, but not too much. You could always add more lentils though to soak up the excess water if you feel like it's too watery. But this is either ready to be served for dinner or it's ready to be ladled into jars. So I'm actually gonna turn my heat off. Just be careful when you're doing this. So if you're spooning it hot into jars, you probably don't want to hang on to the jar. And it is really helpful to have one of these things to put it into your jar. Reach down in there, get more lentils in this batch. All right. Okay. All right, so this was plant-based meal planning. We have breakfast, those are protein balls. We've got lunch, which is our salad in a jar. And then we've got dinner, which is our lentil chili. And I am gonna go ahead and I'm gonna show you exactly what you need to do with this salad because it is really kind of cool. So you're just gonna take the lid off, and we'll put the chili in a bowl too in a second. You're gonna take your lid off, and you're just gonna upend, and everything is gonna come out exactly the way that it should. All right, we got a little tomato. There we go, it just came out. So you've got your gorgeous salad that just came out of your jar. All right, we're going to go ahead and we're gonna dump our chili in a bowl. I suppose you could also, if you're doing the intermittent fasting thing like I do, and you fasted for much of the day, this might be your one meal for the day. All right, so we've got our chili and our salad, and I guess you could have one of these even for dessert. So thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen today. My name is Kelly Bailey. You can find me at www.kellybailey.fit, and I hope you join me again soon.